Get started. Hey, everybody. My name is Michael Morgenstern. I live in the Bay Area, sometimes in Los Angeles, and I'm friends with Michael Healy, and really appreciate coming in here and hearing some of the talks. It's been great. Yeah, I'm going to talk about how in the future storytelling is going to be completely different. There's a lot of changes that we've seen over the course of the past decade in the way that we tell stories and the way we experience stories. And like a lot of disruptive innovation, some of these changes have been invisible, or it's been like a frog boiling water. And at some point, some larger companies and larger projects and people are going to synthesize and integrate all of these different changes, and it's going to result in a change in the way that we experience media and experience storytelling. So there's a lot of this in the fringes and on the horizon, and this is what I'm going to talk about. So my company is called This Is Definitely Real. We are doing something really big in September that relates to all of this, and we found a way to tell decentralized interactive stories that are very similar to the stories that are happening around us, like news events, which is pretty different than a lot of the other interactive projects that have tried the same thing. So our project is about tribalism, and it asks the question, is there an end to tribalism? That's a thing that affects us very much right now. The balkanization of discourse, the fact that there's all these different non-overlapping social spheres, which has caused us to cause a lot of communications breakdown and some problems there. So this project aims to bring that to the forefront. It's also a business that combines the best of immersive theater, of cinema, and of viral interaction design. So I'll show you a trailer, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts and answer any questions and your perspective on the topic. So storytelling then versus storytelling now. What's a big movie? Can someone name a big movie from between 2000 and 2010?
Dog Day Afternoon. Okay,
Dog Day After.
That's definitely not within your years, but
that's not. How about like a blockbuster movie, something that a lot of people knew about?
I don't know any of those.
All right, well, how about let's go with Titanic. People who remember Titanic. By the way, feel free if you want to participate or ask questions during this while I'm talking to type things into the chat. So Titanic it was released in the late 90s, I believe. So Titanic had scale. There were tons of people who knew about it. It was a collective experience that we all witnessed this movie coming out. How did you experience the story of Titanic? If you wanted to experience Titanic, someone tell me, you can unmute yourself, tell me how you would do that.
By not watching it?
Let's imagine you watched it.
I'm kidding. I did watch it. Yeah. No, okay. I remember the ending. That's about it. Oh, and the car scene. But
if you wanted to experience that story, what would you do physically?
If I wanted to experience that story.
When you experienced Titanic, what was that experience like?
I don't know. I was probably pretty high, so I don't really remember it. So it was like it was a movie.
Okay, so you stumble into a theater drunk. There's a ticket taker. You take the ticket. The experience begins really when you hear about the movie. So you hear about the movie with billboards, with commercials. Then you go into this movie theater. You sit down, and for like 5.5 hours, you see the movie Titanic. So afterwards, you go outside. Before the internet, you would talk about it with your friends. Now, if you're really interested in it, you go talk about the internet. And so you had really three experiences that were fairly separate and discordant. You had the promotional experience of the movie and the anticipation. You had the actual movie, which is the thing that James Cameron envisioned and put onto film. And then you had the conversation about the movie. So it's really a media experience, or it was a piece of media with conversation about that piece of media. While you're watching that movie, how many interactions do you have? One, really.
None.
You're sitting there. Yeah,
maybe
none.
With the person next to you.
Yeah. Or I would say you have one interaction.
I smoked a lot of bongs. Like I smoked a shitload of bongs during it. So like that was like at least 10 or 15 interactions. Not with people, but
okay.
With...
Yeah. All right. That's fair. We're getting there. So if you flash forward, the year is 2030. We have contact lenses in our eyes. We walk around the world and we see overlays of things that are happening around us. We see, stock ticker prices. We see news. We see information about our friends. And you go into the store and you buy an experience. And it's an experience of, I don't know, what kind of experience would you want to buy? Let's say you buy a story of two pets who escape from home and are trying to find the people that they live with. So what is that? You purchase that experience. What is that experience going to feel like? Rob, I'd be interested in your thoughts.
Come on, Rob. Everyone's waiting.
Anyone want to unmute? This is supposed to be participatory. All right.
Well, I have no idea what it's going to feel like. I don't know.
Okay.
That's crazy.
So I think that it's going to be an experience that would take place over a week or two. An experience that might take place partially in your kitchen, might take place partially in your room. One of the cats might walk into your room at some point and ask you if you have seen his family. And then an interaction would develop when you're in the street, when you're in a cafe. But that storytelling is going to be decentralized. It's definitely not going to be a little window screen that plays for an hour and a half. Because once you integrate artificial intelligence, once you integrate all the technologies that are being developed right now, it's going to be something that fits into your life and immerses with you. So it's going to have very different qualities. It's going to be nonlinear, it's going to be fragmented, and it's going to be social, because other people who have similar types of experiences, types of hardware, can also interact with that story. This is something that is starting to happen on the internet. And we can see that we are experiencing this type of nonlinear storytelling more and more in our daily lives, and art forms have yet to catch up. And it used to be that we think of a story, a book, as a linear, singular experience. It just doesn't match with the powerful stories that we have today. You think about the story of the impeachment trial. You think about the story of the election of Donald Trump. You think about the story of the Thai boys who were trapped in a cave a few years ago. You think about the story of coronavirus and all the other stories that are happening in relation to it. And these stories are processed through our collective imagination. They're told collectively, and they're things that we experience together. We tell that story together, and they're fragmented. And our brains have become used to understanding and piecing together things through little fragmented bits of information, through headlines. That's the media culture that we live in. One thing that this culture is missing, that something like Titanic had, is a cinematic experience, is something powerful with music, with cinematography, with all the different ways that we have to tell a story in a movie. These different forms are really powerful forms that we've been working on and evolving for over 100 years. And I don't think cinema is going anywhere, but I do think that it is going to be joined and surpassed by all of these different ways of telling stories. So we figured out a way to combine all of these. This is coming out in September. It's a project, like I said, about tribalism and asking the question, is there an end to tribalism? And I'll share with you all the trailer for this project.
Should there be sound?
Yes, there should be sound. I figured this out. I figured it out a little while ago. There we go. Is that working?
I'm posting this because I'm afraid, and my sister Mia is missing. I don't know where she is, but what I do know is that the person who took her, David King, is extremely dangerous.
what?
Ruin my life.
Why did y'all dare each other to ruin each other's lives?
When you're challenged, you get stronger. It sounded like a fun game.
That's fucked up.
Team Takedown. What is this?
Total social revolution.
He's a part of a huge shadowy organization.
I'm gonna learn everything I can about Team Takedown.
What's up, internet? The shit's getting real.
I'm scared, Xander. Come home now. Let's come home.
Thanks for all the positive replies. You guys are making it a lot easier for me. But if you see David, share here. We gotta do what we can to find them. I want you back. I know you're watching.
Where's my fucking sister, David?
Everyone, we have come to the crux of the story. This is the focal point that all of these videos have been leading up to. I didn't realize how strong I could become. It's only after you lose everything that you are free to do anything.
Let's do a little bit of a thought experiment, huh? You've got two possible versions of reality.
So he faked the call.
That's terrifying.
Or was the call that we just had fake?
No, we cannot stop believing everything right now.
First is the Xander Jones story.
You can't just say you didn't do something when I have a photo of you doing it.
It's photoshopped. He can fake evidence.
That I'm a 19-year-old criminal mastermind.
There's 4 keyloggers on your computer. He's been watching every key that you type.
I hacked every account he had.
Don't delete it. It's safer when you know what you can't trust.
I killed innocent people. And it turns out there is a simpler explanation.
I think we gotta stop playing this game.
We can't. He's in control of the narrative. I mean, there's no quitting.
So that movie is called I Dare My Best Friend to Ruin My Life, and it's coming out over social media over the course of 2 weeks, along with a massive online movement. And I'm going to tell you how we're creating that movement of dozens of social media characters and hopefully millions, 10 to 100 million people. That movement is going to have an alternate movement, which is a foil to that story of these two boys trying to ruin each other's lives, which is about treating each other better over the internet. Which is about finding an end to tribalism and a call for civility. And as part of that movement, we're prototyping a lot of different tools and ways for us to improve the way that we communicate with each other to create an environment of vulnerability and emotional openness on the internet and support that where it exists. So how do the mechanics of this project work together? These videos come out each in 10-minute sections from the main character's social media account. And as those videos go out, the internet interacts with them. There's going to be a lot of different hacks of celebrities by the group Team Takedown, the bad guys group, which will result in Xander, our main character, saving the day. There's going to be a lot of different interactions and ways that people can interact, as well as an interactive online story told through a game that people can play deep down the rabbit hole of the story. So we're combining a number of different things which are pretty well established and pretty well established. So one is viral strategies. We have 20 or 30 different fictional groups that are all linking in together, and those are going to all each on their own strive for virality, and then when they get viewers, they're going to send viewers across the project. So it's basically taking a model of immersive theater, which is something I've been designing immersive theater experiences, and people on our team have been producing large immersive theater projects for almost a decade. Immersive theater like Sleep No More, like in some ways Meow Wolf, like some large scale events in the Bay Area, is an environment and a series of strategies to create a story so that when somebody enters a space, they're engaged in the story and they're involved and they're able to interact with the story. And that story plays out in a fractal way across all of their different experiences, interactions. So the way we're doing this is there's a giant, I call it alternate reality cinema, or ARC. And it's because we're creating a giant ARC. And this ARC is about two people who are destroying each other's lives. And in this process, it's a fable that helps us understand the conflicts that we experience on our own, the tribal conflicts. And then within that arc, there's all of these other different projects that are all working within the same themes. These are interrelating with each other. And then we ask for users and viewers to generate their own content related to these themes. For example, asking, we're working with HitRecord to make a whole series, like have their users make a whole series of videos about bullying. We'll be asking questions on YouTube about that time that you were doxxed or you were hacked, bringing this to the forefront. So we create a fractal conversation that allows itself to propagate across all different social platforms and all different locations where you might have a conversation. And then we're doing social media. So social media is extraordinarily powerful. We saw it like in 2016 with the election of Donald Trump. Since then, that it's a place where disinformation can very easily be spread. It's also a place where networks can quickly be built. It's a place where conversations can happen in a disaggregated way. And it's a perfect place to stage an event like this. So we're going to be putting our story out on Reddit, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and others. So the main inspiration for this project was news events. That we really, what we want to do is create a whole bunch of content that is clearly fictional, but that follows the pattern of a news event. So in a news event, for example, you can tweet at the people involved in a news event. You can try to sway the news there, but you can't actually change much. And if you tried really hard, you might be able to change much. But you are able, for example, with an election, you're able to operate on a small scale with your own branch of that news event. And so that's something we're allowing people to do. A lot of the different ways that interactivity has been tried, it's often giving users too much choice, that you have to be able to constantly be making decisions in order to experience an interactive piece. So that wasn't something that we wanted to do. We have different segments of our project which allow a high level of interactivity, but that's not, for the most part, a lot of it is passive experience of viewership with an option for interactivity if you want to try. So what we are doing, the reason I call it alternate reality cinema is because it is an alternate reality project. It's a project that is just almost as interactive as alternate reality as if you put contact lenses on and you experience a story wherever you went, in your home or outside, because social media is our reality. Like it or not, it is an experience that occupies many hours and many people's days, and it's something that something that we get a reflection of ourselves on, something that we see our friends on. And so by staging this project on the massive stage that is social media and the internet, it's almost as if we're staging it in the real world in an alternate reality fashion. Especially now with coronavirus, these tiny little squares that we're looking at are a window into reality. So I don't know where we'll be in September in terms of coronavirus, but if we are still in our homes, or if we go back into our homes, this experience is going to be one that has that power of allowing people to really deeply engage. Why is this important? Why is it important to us to create this? I believe that it's really important for these tools to be used responsibly. I believe it's really important for this story to be told, for a story that frames the existential risk of the communications breakdown that we are in right now, because to address a problem, it needs to be made visible. And because this problem is so heated, because we're so inside of it, there is not often an opportunity for us to really step back and look at the scope and scale and structure of disinformation, of this problem, and of why we are fighting with each other when deep down we are so similar. So I believe stories are how they change our world. They power our framing of our own situation. They help us talk about things. Fables historically have been the way that cultures and religions frame themselves. The power of the story of Jesus, the power of the story of Muhammad, some of these stories are so incredibly powerful that they help us understand who we are better. We need new stories. We need stories that help us understand this world, because the stories are coming out at the same regular pace they have, and the world is changing drastically on a month-by-month basis. And so a large part of this project is empowering people and reminding people that we are the architects of our own stories. And that's what I hope to see as we transition into augmented reality, if people choose to do so, that we are empowered to create these stories, that these things don't become yet another tool of societal control, yet another way to get you to buy things, but that really we are able to choose these top level narratives. We are able to affect the group decisions that our communities make. And I think that we are starting to see the democratization of media. We've been seeing that really since about 2000, when making a film got really cheap. I suppose we've been seeing it since the printing press. And it really is, because the democratization of media, the democratization of power and control is one of the reasons we have this terrible disinformation, but it's also an incredible tool. And it's a tool to allow us to transform our own world in ways that weren't possible in the past. It's a tool that allows us to tell stories in ways that weren't possible in the past. And I'm really excited to see this future come about. So we've got 10 minutes left. I would love to hear any of your questions or thoughts or reactions to this.
I mean, it looks like a cool trailer for sure. It looks like a cool trailer, but I have no comment that you want to hear, but it looks like a cool trailer. I mean, okay, you're talking about like narrative as a thing that is powerful, right? But you're also pushing out this thing which is inherently disinformation, right? That's the whole goal of this project. It's to
no, our ethical policy doesn't allow us to do things that are designed to trick people. So like it's every piece of content we put out there has a tell. So it's like an overlay over social media that calls attention to itself for being fictional. So the action point for people is to ask them to play along rather than to be tricked. And that's even, it's something that we believe in from an ethical perspective, but also people don't really like being tricked. We've done some tests. We went to Sundance and we pretended that we were the Russians who stole the 2016 election. And there was a group of people with terrible Russian accents who acted in the most absurd ways. And I think everybody but like 2 people knew immediately that we were joking. And those people were upset. And so for us, it's being sure that we put the line a place where people are seeing it. And that's also, I think that this is where media is going, is people are increasingly comfortable with stories being told as well.
So I have a question. Is there potential for people to take this playing along thing and like really like change the story?
Yeah. So each of our projects are designed, everything we do is designed to be responsive. So for example, our videos from Xander, we have these fictional flashbacks that are from a year ago. And the opening of those videos is a webcam video where he says like, hey everybody, like, what's up, Eugene, thanks so much for that comment you made. All right, now back to the story. So that is where our plan is to reshoot that in the morning before we release. And that allows us to be really responsive in those videos. Also, all the social media posts are going to be doing, it's the live performance that we're executing with a ton of pre-planned content. And so there's certain things that aren't going to change. There's certain things that are going to change. But the structure of it is designed to be responsive. So for example, we shot the movie in July. We were planning on a very different world when this movie released. COVID has been entirely written into our story. Because of the way that we structured it, we're shooting like 3 extra shots, adding a little bit of voiceover, and then most of the interactivity already hasn't been built, and so that's going to be built around it. And it actually, COVID allowed us to take the thing that was supposed to be the ending of the movie, and we're going to be launching that over the next few weeks. And so there's this thing that we're launching that is going to like later wrap around in this beautiful way to the movie. So all the projects are built with that in mind, with like, okay, which of this project is definitely not going to change? You know, if I start telling a bunch of jokes about potted plants are still going to be a thing. But if I start referencing things that are in the news, then I'm going to film that and set that up in a way that I can change that on the fly.
Cool.
Hi, Michael. I came in a little bit late, and so this question might be moot, but I heard you mention briefly about some like mythological constructs that you're using to sort of help people identify either with like the arc of the storyline or the plight of the character originally. And I was wondering, are you like going deeply, you know, for example, into Campbell's writings or some, you know, or some like psychoanalytic technique which enables people to both, you know, relate to the main character, but then also like at the same moment you have to be able to step back and see themselves in the arc of what's being, you know, of what's unfolding.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm really glad you asked that. And yes, like that's a lot of our thinking around, for example, asking people to make memes about David King, the bad guy, is designed to get David King to become this stand-in in your mind for this person that you hate. You know, and it's, I think, for a certain political candidate, for a certain person in your family, for a person who bullied you. And what our project does over the arc of it is it starts with this, with Sander, this really scared looking, lonely kid who's on the run and his life has been totally destroyed, crying out for help. And then he tells you about this evil person, David. And over the course of the movie, you start to realize, especially near the end, that Xander hasn't really been as upfront with us as he thought he was. And that this guy that we've all been trying to completely destroy is really sympathetic, has a lot of reasons why he acted the way that he did. And in the end, hopefully is somebody that we would rather just give a hug to. And that's, you know, that's a statement about tribalism. That's a statement about politics today. And it's meant to, by the end of the project, feel like a very personal statement. And I think that that's an incredibly powerful thing I've seen done in immersive theater. Like a lot of the interaction design elements we borrow from immersive theater, because immersive theater actually is a pretty great, in a bunch of people running around confused while actors are doing things. They, you know, now that we've figured out some ways to structure that and make it work, it's a good parallel for the internet. And in immersive theater, one of the most powerful techniques is, for example, asking someone to close their eyes and tell a story or imagine a story about a specific person in their life, and then have that story relate to the main show. You know, because the stories in our lives are so related to these universal stories in movies.
Oh yeah, that's really interesting. This is my first time hearing about immersive theater, but it sounds also that, well, I heard you mention briefly, like, you know, about augmented reality, and you said if people choose to have, you know, this experience of, you know, augmented reality, how do you negotiate that fuzzy line when you're telling a story, which is kind of enacting itself upon, you know, people's sense of, you know, agency in their own myth that they're living out, but then also because if they're too objective about it, then they can't be immersed. But if they're too immersed, they can't be objective. So, you know, how do you, negotiate
Well, I
that?
think you asked the same question. Anytime you like put up a billboard, you know, that living like communication in media is inherently, you know, putting a story to other people. And even if you opt into watching a movie, you haven't opted into every scene of that movie, every statement that every character makes. You know, so I think a lot of it is being as upfront and honest as we can be. One thing that has, you know, we've dived really deep into post-truth and what does it mean for something to be real and something to be fictional. And I think that a lot of the things that are the most true aren't things that relate to facts, aren't things that relate to feelings. You know, and it's important to be able to tell what's real and what the facts are, because sometimes that's a safety issue, sometimes it's a blame and fault issue. But it's also that the things that the stories we're telling are like, these are real stories. You know, these are things that happen. Our fictional group Team Takedown is a parody of takedown culture. You know, they're just trying to take down every single person in position of power using disinformation, and they're like super elite 15-year-old hackers. But it's also like, that's a thing that's really happening. I'm putting a link to our trailer in here, and if you go there, if you're interested in hearing more, there's an email sign up, and would love to keep you all informed about what's going on. And if anyone has other questions, I'm happy to keep chatting.